why don't we go ahead and get started? We have about 27 on. As more will keep coming. I'd like to welcome everybody today to our webinar, Alternative Funding Models. You know, we have a great panel, and thanks to all the panelists and Russell for moderating. A couple of quick announcements. Our next webinar is on June 12th, which is going to be on leading during a crisis, which is a timely issue. And then the following week, starting on June 15th, we have our virtual pitch rounds focused on companies that are very broadly in working on COVID-related products. So it could be anything from a treatment or a vaccine or those types of things, but then also even telehealth and you know, hygiene, not hygiene, but you know, products that help hospitals get clean and things like that. So that's a pretty good week. It's going to be each day that week for a couple hours in the afternoon, and then on Friday we'll have 4 finalists that will present on Friday, and we'll have a winner that we'll announce on June 22nd. So should be interesting, and we'll get that up. It's going to be a similar, we were just talking with the panelists about the Bio International Convention system. It'll be similar where you'll be able to log in ahead of time and try to schedule meetings and things. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Russell Allen. Oh, one other thing, if you have a question, there are a couple ways to ask questions. There's a chat feature at the bottom. You can use that one, or you can use the Q&A button as well. I will, and Russell will as well. We'll be following those, and we'll try to break in when we have a good moment. So please ask questions, and Russell.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you, Jason, and thank you to the panelists today. We are, as Jason said, we're going to be fielding questions sort of as we go. We'll do the best we can to monitor that on the chat window. So Jason or I might chime in as we go with that. So what we'll do is dive right in with some introductions. I'll first introduce myself, Russell Allen. I'm the President and CEO of Georgia Research Alliance. GRA is a public-private partnership designed to enhance the research enterprise at Georgia universities. Flagship program many people have heard about is the Eminent Scholars Program. About 75 scholars have been recruited to Georgia universities on permanent endowments, and so we fill those chair roles as they become vacant. And then we support their work and other work at the universities in the form of laboratory infrastructure support. And then our venture development team has both a grant program and a loan program for startups, and the grant program for university commercialization projects. I'm also a volunteer president of the Biomed Investor Network, so I might chime in some perspectives as we go from that angel group. It's about a 5-year-old angel organization focused only on life sciences. We've been inactive the last few months, but we're hoping to relaunch that group in the fall, if not sooner. So I think it'll be interesting to hear the perspectives of our panelists as well on angel as one of the types of alternative funding models. And we're going to talk a lot today about the current environment and what we anticipate being the future environment for investing and raising capital. So I'm going to move right in. I have, in no necessarily particular order, but the order that was given to me, I'm going to ask that the panelists introduce themselves, and maybe we'll go ahead with your introduction into the first question. And that is, if you could describe your approach to investing, what are your programs? And are those programs available for particular sectors of life sciences, particular stages, et cetera? So if you could just give us kind of an overview of your organization and how you invest, that'll help set the stage for the rest of our conversation. So we'll start with Bob Creeden. Bob, the floor is yours.
Yeah, great. Thanks, everybody. Welcome, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to be part of the plan. So Bob Creeden, I'm the Managing Director of the University of Virginia Seed Fund and New Ventures Group. We're part of the Licensing and Ventures Group, which is the commercialization arm of the university. So part of our office will take care of the normal licensing, tech transfer, material transfer agreements, all of that. Our side of the office is the investment side. So we're looking at, we have a $10 million fund. Half of it came from the university itself and the other half from the health system. About 60% or so of our deals are probably in the health side, maybe a little bit more. All of different types, from therapeutics to tools to diagnostics to IT, that kind of thing. We're just about 3.5 years old that I came to UVA then. We've done 15 total deals, 9 initial and 6 follow-on. We've had 1 in acquisition for a good exit, and we're hoping, knock on wood, that another one comes up next week. We're all but you know, until the signing is done and money exchanges, you never know. So the venture fund, pretty much standard process, you know, for diligence that we do. My background is early stage ventures since 1989 at 3 different firms in Boston. So I've just brought that process here to UVA. So there's nothing different about what we do than anyone else. The new ventures side is where we actually start companies. So we will take research that's being developed by faculty or clinicians or students or alums at the university, work with an EIR or you know, management, if you will, form the company, put the dollars in, attract syndicate money, and then move that forward. So it really covers from the very, very first, hey, we like this, we think this is a good disclosure, it could be a company, how do we do that, putting money and human capital resources alongside, all the way to, you know, if we've got a company that's run by an alum, as we do, Series Technology, which is a good Southeast company, you know, we'll go alongside a major venture fund out of Boston to do that. No sector focus, like to be the first dollars in, and you know, just try to be very active and bring all of the resources of the licensing group, our background at the fund, and you know, the background and alumni that we have at UVA, and just the network that we've all built over the last 20 years or so.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bob. We'll move on to Vivian.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining. So I work for the North Carolina Biotechnology Center, and I head up the investment program. We've been doing investments in early stage life science for about 30 years. We've invested in about 225 companies in North Carolina. So our focus is early stage, particularly therapeutic-based companies. We also invest in device to diagnostics. They tend to be a little bit later staged. Part of what we also do at the center is we have a very large economic development group that works to recruit companies to North Carolina, and also a grants-based program to fund university technology spin out. So part of what our group does, in addition to the funding, is a lot of mentoring and a big effort on introductions of our companies to key investors. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Vivian. And next, Stephanie.
Hi, so my name is Stephanie Fertig, and I'm the Health and Human Services lead for the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Programs, or SBIR and STTR programs. And I'm sure many of you may already know about the SBIR and STTR programs. They've been around for a while, and they're known as America's Seed Fund. So, and at HHS, we spend about $1.2 billion a year specifically on small businesses to help them, with small businesses to help them do the research and development necessary to get to a commercial product. Now, I'm actually within the National Institutes of Health. We have a new office, the SEED, Now, seed is a word, but and we're part of America's Seed Fund, but it also stands for Small Business Education and Entrepreneurial Development. And so really it's not just funding. While yes, the NIH provides grants, contracts, and cooperative agreements, again, to help do that research and development that's often necessary to get to a pivotal point, to get to potentially either commercialization or other funders, whether it's angel investors, partners, etc. But we help provide some additional support around that. So we work with academics and individuals to help them understand the small business program, help them understand some of the entrepreneurship that's necessary to start a small business. And at the other side, we help work with innovators to provide support through we have regulatory support available, entrepreneurs in residence who can provide pitch coaching. We also send some of our awardees to different conferences. We were just talking with the panel about the upcoming bio conference, and we're sending a number of our awarded companies to that conference, helping pitch coach them, helping them kind of think about what partnerships, what meetings to have, and then giving them that opportunity to go meet with investors or partners at these kinds of conferences and doing these kinds of activities. So we are, while yes, many of us think about the small business program, and I've been at NIH for 15 years now, the small business program is near and dear to my heart. We're actually more than just funding. We try to provide support around that funding as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And Matt.
Thank you, Russell. Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Hughes. I'm a partner at Allele Capital Partners. And I guess you can call us an alternative source of capital. We are in the investment management business and investment banking business, but we would be defined as a merchant bank. So as our name suggests, Allele Capital Partners, we are only focused in life science, largely focused on therapeutics. Occasionally we'll look at devices, but we try to stick to therapeutics. And what we're doing as an investment banking affiliate is we're putting in our own principal capital, but we're also raising syndicate capital around our investment. And so we're looking to get involved with really promising, typically early stage biotechs. We help stand them up. And I think what's unique about our model is we look to go public as soon as we can. Not prematurely, not without good cause or good precedent within the public markets, but part of our strategy is to take really promising early companies and get them public. One thing that's interesting about us and about our model as being a merchant bank is that we do see the funding landscape from an interesting vantage point because we are raising money from high net worth investors. We are working with and sometimes syndicating with other VCs. And as an investment bank that's orchestrating a go public strategy, we have a pretty good pulse on the public markets. And so I think we have to be really good about understanding where is there, to your point, Russell, earlier, where is their angel, interest? Where is their VC interest? Where is their public market interest? And understanding how to navigate from private to public and understanding where there's investor demand in each one of those buckets, if you will. And so we kind of see the whole universe in a sense, and we have a pretty, niche focus within it. And that's what we do.
That's great. Thank you. So just a follow-up on the introductions. Could you dive in a little bit more each on the key, what are the important key factors in your approach to deploying capital? So, are you looking for particular milestones? Are certain factors more important than others, like the experience of the management team, of course, the IP, and how do you navigate that, generally speaking? And we'll go back in the same order and start with Bob, please.
Yeah, I think everyone, talks about management and markets and things like that. One of the maybe off-center things that I've always looked at, because this happened to me, is nice to have versus need to have. Everyone always talks about that, where I've had experiences where if it's nice to have, people may pay for it. If it's a real need, they will. But even beyond that, especially in the life sciences, what I found is it a behavioral change, or does it really affect the workflow of, the user? Because what I've found, believe it or not, in some of the leading hospitals back in Boston is that if it was too much of a workflow or behavioral change, people wouldn't adopt it. They would just continue doing it the way they did. So I think, the standard ones of management, market, IP, certainly those are all really important. But I guess this little off-center one is that I look at whether this device or, a diagnostic or something is going to cause so much of a behavioral change that people just won't use it. They'll do what they've done for the last, 10, 20, whatever number of years. So it's a little bit different than what everyone thinks about. It's one of, 12 factors that Matt and Stephanie and Vivian will talk about, I'm sure. But just think about that all the time. Is this going to be enough of a behavioral or workflow change that, the folks that are going to use it may just not adopt it?
Right. Okay. And Vivian?
So it really depends on what stage we're viewing this company, what we look for. So about 50% of our companies that we fund are coming from our university systems. And in those cases, it's a little less about the management and even a little less about their financing, much more about their technology and IP. So we spend much more time assessing those characteristics of the company. As the company grows, it changes. If a company comes to us that's a little bit more advanced, we're looking more carefully at the commercial opportunity and their team management. So we play a little bit of a game here depending on where those assets come into us. For medical devices, because they tend to move more quickly, at least in our system here in North Carolina, we are looking at the commercialization team in the market much more heavily. So we have to sort of, tweak what we do in our assessment based on the stage of the companies. Back to the universities, we're very much aware that a lot of times we're funding the early stage founders. And that they may have a very small board and a few advisors, but not many. We're okay with that because what we're really doing is assessing the technology at that point, knowing that it will transition over time.
Okay, great. Thank you, Vivian. And Stephanie?
So we're also often looking at things that are in that earlier stage. The small business programs are structured so that there's a first phase, a feasibility phase, and then a second phase, which is the further research and development. And unfortunately, these are not related to clinical trial phases. I didn't make that. I did not create that nomenclature. But so we often see things at that early phase one where they're really doing a feasibility study, where it's really more about, as Vivian indicated, the technology. That said, even in our second phase, there is this commercialization component. Now, these do go through the NIH peer review process. We're looking at the 5 main review criteria, which is significance, innovation, approach, environment, and the team or the innovator itself. And so we do all look at those, but we do look at them with the slant towards, with a more commercial perspective. When we're thinking about significance, it's, how will it affect the market, for example. So but again, there is a focus on the technology. There is a focus on what is the scientific approach, what are you planning to do with the funds that you're asking for. The nice thing about the SBIR program and the STTR program at NIH is there's a wealth of resources on our small business website. So for those who don't know, sbir.nih.gov, very easy. But there are sample applications online, and everybody who submits an application actually gets feedback from the peer review. So even if you're not selected for funding, you'll find out why. And you have the ability to reach out and contact a program officer. And in fact, if there's one thing I hope people can take away from the panel today is contact us. We're very open to speaking with you in advance of preparing a proposal. I know I don't know if I'm allowed to answer the questions at this point, but I saw a question come up already about, how do I get through the application process? It can be a little long and it can be complicated. what help is available. And the first thing I would say is reach out to your program officer. If you're not sure what program officer, who's the right program officer, you can email sbir@od.nih.gov, or that information is also available on that website, and we can connect you with the right person and they can help answer some of those questions. And there's also different applicant assistance programs that are available at the NIH for some institutes have. So we do try to make the factors that we judge things on, very clear, very transparent, and then we also try to provide that feedback so you know what we're thinking as we're making selections and determinations.
Very good. I know it's hard a lot of times for entrepreneurs to find that feedback. It's not always available, and not all funders have the resources to really be able to do that. So that's great to know that that's available for SBIR and STTR. Matt, can you tell us a little bit more about those factors important to you?
Sure. So I'm not an attorney, but I'll give you an attorney-like answer, which is it depends. So I would say that, first and foremost, the central core to anything that we evaluate is the product and the market potential for the product. And so what we need and then many of the other factors that you mentioned, so milestones, management, IP, other things we consider, or I consider, de-risking elements. And so a rockstar management team is great, but are they behind a good product? So first and foremost, it starts with the product. And I think what we really look for, not just in the ideas we evaluate and the products and the programs that we evaluate, what we really want to understand is the story around it and the context around it. An antibody that has great data, in whatever indication is great, but can you help give some context behind that? What are the existing therapies? What's the standard of care? What else? And even more so than that, because a lot of people will give you that, but more so than that, what does the developmental landscape look like? And why really, not now, but why in 5 years or 10 years is this a therapy that fits within the treatment paradigm? Why are payers going to be okay? Well, we need those answers. We need comfort around those answers. And that's first and foremost. Even, we definitely have an affinity to platform-oriented companies, and that's something you'll hear from a lot of folks. But at the end of the day, if the platform's not producing a viable product, then you still have an issue. So I think first and foremost, we want to understand the program and where it fits into the marketplace today and 5 years, 10 years from now. I think the other elements are very important, and I'll speak to one factor you mentioned specifically, which is management team. And that's huge. We're about to launch on a deal, and one of the founders sold his last company for $1 billion. And that means a lot. It means a lot because, first of all, that he can probably spot good assets. But more so than that, that you have an executor and an operator behind the technology. I think we've had issues in the past, or have run into problems in the past where a scientific founder doesn't necessarily have the operational lens to kind of view how to bring the company forward. And that matters a lot when we get to one of the other factors that you mentioned, which is milestones. So do you have someone driving the bus that will bring the company to the milestones that will unlock the most value? And you can only know that if you understand the marketplace and understand what milestones get the most credit within the marketplace. And so I'll just summarize by saying, first and foremost, the product, where it stands within the treatment paradigm for whatever you're going after. But then more broadly, do you have the operational team that can execute and deliver the milestones that will unlock the most value?
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you all for some of the background information. So that hopefully gives our audience a better understanding of the types of programs that are available. There are others, of course, but I think this is a great sampling that Jason and team put together. We've entered a new world, as we all know, and the fact that we're doing this via webinar is probably reflective of that. When all of this started, I mentioned the at GRA, the venture development team, and we noticed that, we fund university research, and most university labs were closing. And so we thought, well, does that mean, we're going to, slow down as well? Of course, the labs that were remained open were doing work related to COVID research, but we fund a lot of other technologies. But we also recognize that people have more time on their hands to do grant writing or complete business plans. So we actually saw an uptick in applications coming into our system. So I'm curious to hear if you all experienced something similar. Have you seen a change in demand since this whole thing started, and maybe it's shifted over the last 2.5, 3 months? But what are you finding in that regard, or what do you anticipate the demand might look like? And we'll go back to Bob.
Yeah, I think, Russell, we're pretty similar. The faculty, clinicians, all those folks couldn't maybe do their lab work, but they did have a lot of ideas and a lot of thoughts, and some of them have business plans in their mind, so they're now able to put it, down on paper and get it into us. So we're seeing a lot more deals than we might have had we not been in a pandemic. And I think that's been great because we've been able to also kind of, give some to our entrepreneurs in residence. We've got 5 of them. And so this is where, you can get with a faculty member and talk about how the research or the effort should be more commercially focused. What we found is that, and I'm sure everyone else has too, that a lot of the faculty members are doing great research, but their mindset is, research. And sometimes they go down a path that's pure research rather than something that can be commercial, which just causes, an extra step when it comes out of the university, to get it to be commercials. But we've seen a lot, because nobody is quote unquote working in place. We've had a lot of phone calls. Matt and myself, the other, there's 2 of us at the fund. We've had more calls with KOLs, with faculty members, with people looking for money, probably did before March, just because folks are out there looking for it. And a lot of it, has been COVID. In the last week or so, there's a donor to the university that has put up sizable amount of money for COVID-related solutions, whether it be infrastructure or therapeutic or diagnostic or something like that. So we had 51, proposals submitted for that. And that was I bet there was probably a week's notice, not much more than that. So these folks really got to working, and, we've narrowed it down now, and I think we're going to award like 7 or 8 some money to do this, but there's going to be more. And then I also heard there's another foundation that's looking to do the same thing at UVA. So I think we're just going to see more and more because people have these ideas, but because they're not doing their day-to-day work, they're writing and putting plans together and talking to people and submitting for money. So we're very busy. We have not seen any lessening in folks looking for dollars.
Right.
Which is good.
That's certainly good. Good for this conversation and audience, I'm sure. Vivian, are you finding the same thing in North Carolina?
Yeah, so several things are coming at the same time. I think the first was that with COVID-19, we just had an onslaught of requests, and we happen to have a company here, more than one, developing a diagnostic. So in the very beginning, we were working with those companies and trying to connect those companies to the resources they need, whether they be financial or workforce or even space to expand development of their diagnostic kits. So all of that was going on. At the same time, the companies that we had already funded were all trying to get in their milestone-based reports so they could get paid out. And that's what any smart CEO is going to do. They want to get their money as quickly as possible. So that happened. And then on top of it, we had some companies do a little pivot to get into the COVID-19 space. So we're advising them on that. In some cases, don't go there. In other cases, please proceed. And then what happened is we do our loans in cycles. So we have debt financing as well as convertible notes. And a lot of companies have come back, new companies and those we previously funded with interest in additional funding. And on top of that, we're not seeing a slowdown with regard to our outreach or mentoring. So every company that comes to us, we mentor them in some way and provide feedback, even if they're not quite ready for our program at that point in time. So I was asked for an amount. I'd say we're about 20% over what we were this time last year in terms of workload.
There we go, David. Thank you. Appreciate that, Vivian. And Stephanie, so NIH, are you seeing your group or others there seeing a flood? I would guess that might be the case for you.
Well, so we're still supporting, we're still supporting and still interested in technologies that are across our mission space. So one of the questions that I think, we've certainly received is, are you just interested in COVID-related technologies? And certainly we are interested in those, but we're interested in all the SBIRs across our mission space. We actually had our most recent SBIR receipt date was in April. We have a standard receipt date that's for all of our applications that's coming up in September. And so it will be very interesting to see how many applications we receive in September. I know I've gotten a number of inquiries about all sorts of applications, and I'm sure other program officers across NIH have as well. For specific information about COVID-related opportunities and COVID-related information, both for awardees and applicants, what I'm going to do is put the link that we have up in the chat. I'm not going to read it all out. I think that'll be a better and easier way to give it to everyone. But there's also a link off of that if you click away from this in the future and can't remember, what was that website. We do have a link to that to that information for NIH applicants and recipients of funding on the small business webpage as well, that sbir.nih.gov website. I would state that if you are a small business, oftentimes, we often think about the SBIR and STTR programs, and those are specific for small businesses, but often other opportunities at NIH are also open to small businesses, and sometimes special funding opportunities may be available to academics, small businesses, and other institutions as well. So it's worth it to take a look at the eligibility and see if you're eligible. It's not just the SBIR program. There are other opportunities out there, and so all of those COVID-related opportunities are in that website that I'm going to put in the chat. I will state that I don't have an exact percentage of what my workload has been like, and it's really hard to compare in this brave new world.
Right. Matt, Alil, are you seeing a change over there?
I don't know if a change. I just don't think we've seen a slowdown. I think we've definitely seen this pivoting of companies that not necessarily are abandoning their lead programs, but are adding on, to Vivian's point earlier, that are considering or are going full force into adding on a COVID-related program. So we're seeing a lot of that, and I mean a lot. If I were to throw a percentage, I'd say maybe 70+% of the companies that we work with or talk to have some COVID-related program that they're exploring, some more seriously than others. So that has picked up a lot. But a lot of the companies that we deal with, they were conceived many years ago, or it's been many years in the making, and so there's still a capital need. And as we all know, in biotech, and especially early stage biotech, there's a long time until any revenue opportunity. So you're just raising money. You're constantly in the cycle of raising money, and so that has not paused at all. And so the flow has been pretty consistent with us. And by the way, our screening capacity has not slowed. So we're still looking at all of these opportunities. We just finished, a financing, and as I mentioned, we're about to launch a financing. And so we are maintaining, I think, our level of productivity that we've, held over the last many years. So it's been pretty consistent.
Okay, great. Well, and that sort of dovetails into my next question, which maybe I'll couple with the one after that. So the next question I was going to ask is whether you are taking a different approach to investing. You know, do you have more or less to invest? And Matt, you just, you know, addressed that. Or are you shifting your focus, you know, among sectors at all, more COVID related? So some of you have already addressed that. If you have anything to add on to that, that would be great. But I think it's also from another perspective, from the entrepreneurial perspective, how are entrepreneurs finding you? Or, you know, and is there any advice you might give to our audience about in a world where we don't have sort of the coffee shop effect, or we don't have in-person conventions? We talked about, you know, bio being virtual now, and so those are certainly still available to us, but do you have any other advice for how entrepreneurs might reach you or other sources of capital as we are mostly still working remotely? Back to Bob.
Yeah, so we haven't changed the way we do things or how we do things. You know, unfortunately, I'm probably old enough to have gone through both the bubble and the 2008, you know, situations. So learning from that, you know, in both instances, the firms I was with, we kept our focus on where we were you know, what our industry was, how we did our deals, what we looked at. And I think now, you know, what entrepreneurs have to be aware of is that a lot of funds are going to be focusing more on their portfolio, still do new deals. You know, we'll still do new deals. We closed the new deal 30 days ago. We closed 2 portfolio deals about 10 days ago. So we're still active investing. It's just that as we look at the pipeline of new deals versus portfolio, we're probably going to focus a little more on the portfolio. And Matt can probably speak to this better than I, but I look at it as the exit. You know, with the volatility in the marketplace, with acquisitions not occurring as much as they did, therefore I've got to hold on to that portfolio company 1 or 2 more rounds. So I've got to make sure I've got reserve for that, which takes away from new ones. So that may be the only change in an approach, but there's still new deals. We're still going to do it. And I think I tried to think of, you know, contacting, and, you know, one of my favorite things was and I was an entrepreneur before a venture guy, I would go to meetings where venture investors or angels would be. So, you know, back in Boston, I went to the MIT Enterprise Forum every single month because I knew that there's going to be 10 investors there. So I'd go meet them, I'd go network, I'd go try to build that relationship with them. And somehow now I'm saying, well, 10, you know, webinars like this, where you may be able to see a face, get a name, and maybe there's someone else on the list of attendees that you know that knows that person. So I think it's still the better way to do it is network as much as you can. And with people more available for calls, I think, you know, lawyers, accountants, other entrepreneurs that know people, just keep working that network as hard as you can. And it's hard in the Zoom era, but
Yeah.
maybe people have more time to actually call.
New definition added to networking, I guess. I remember telling my teenage daughter a year or so ago that, you know, being on her phone on you know, FaceTime or something like that didn't count as being social, but I guess that advice is out the window now.
Yeah, true.
Vivian.
So we expect to do the same number of deals, I think, that we've done, and we have roughly the same amount of money. One of the things that we're struggling with right now is that we have our repeat clients coming back for a second round, and then we have new companies coming in. And a big discussion in my group right now is how do we handle that? Because some of our current companies are working and have worked through this. It depends on if they're university affiliated. University affiliated areas are shut down. If they're independent laboratories, they may be working. So we've got a mix of what some of our companies are doing right now, what their productivity is. So that may slow them down. They may need additional monies. On the other hand, there's these new spin outs. So probably one of the things that we will do is that we will try to balance that as best we can, but we're likely to give new companies that we're seeing for the first time time less money. They're all milestone based, but less money to start till we have a better assessment of how far they can go on those funds. One other thing, just to throw out the second part of your question related to contacting us.
Right.
So you're right that not having that direct exposure and running into each other is an issue, but people are very effectively using connections and, introductions to get to sources of capital. And anyone out there, that's what I would do. Just anyone who knows someone, just keep working through it so that you can get your technology in front of somebody with some funds. You just have to work it a little differently as opposed to in person.
Yeah. And Stephanie, how about you?
Yeah, so we are, as I hinted before, we have upcoming receipt dates. The NIH, because of our application process, and because oftentimes you don't need to physically have met with a program officer. Many program officers don't meet with applicants. We find it often more effective to maybe have 1 or 2 conversations by phone and answer questions by email to make sure that questions and everything is addressed that way. So oftentimes, while we will meet people at conferences, and certainly we've been missing that, and missing the ability to meet with people face to face and do that kind of outreach to increase awareness, we still get calls, we still get emails, and we still really encourage that. And that continues happening if I'm in my house or I'm in my office. And so we're still open and we're still doing all of that. And our receipt dates are coming and we plan to continue moving forward. So from that perspective, NIH in a lot of ways, we're here and we can provide some stability to the small businesses in that, the funding is still here and it's still available.
Good. That's great. Matt, how about you guys?
Sure. So to go back to your coffee shop, concept, Russell. So I think that if anything, maybe we can use this to an advantage, right? Especially for us in the Southeast, we are not necessarily as concentrated in some areas or others than say some of the, biotech hubs of the country, right? I'm sitting now as we speak in South Florida, which is not known as, bustling Kendall Square. So, I think that you can use that as an advantage. I think LinkedIn is a great tool. I think virtual conferences are great tools. I think that you can make a very focused effort on examining anyone and really anyone that fits within the either investor bucket, the collaborator bucket, the granting association bucket, or other non-dilutive areas, disease-focused charities and foundations, and you can reach a lot of people just digitally, either by email, LinkedIn, etc. So I think that this current environment could be an opportunity to try to rely less on in-person interactions and maybe more on exploring direct digital interactions. I think people are open, and especially given the fact that people are not on the move, people are not traveling, you might get more receptivity than others. I know that we look at things that are sent to us. I think warm intros always help, but you can always build new connections that get new connections. And so anyway, I'll just kind of second the theme of networking, and there are a lot of digital ways to do that. Regarding our activity, I'll just make another comment on that. We are in the 3rd month of really this lockdown that we've experienced, and obviously things are starting to open up. I don't know if we've all even seen the real impact that this will have on the deal environment, especially in the private company sphere. I know the company we're about to finance, we met with back at JP Morgan, right? It's been one that's kind of been in the works. And so a lot of seeds had been planted months and months ago for the deals that we're seeing get done today. But that being said, I think that even if we see deal activity execution slow, especially on the private side, I think that there's still a lot of appetite to look at and examine companies. And I think that the best way to maximize the current opportunity is to just be as best prepared as possible. And again, I think a great thing for entrepreneurs is to look at publications like Endpoints, Fierce Biotech, all these other industry publications, especially that focus on financing activity, and understand what's getting financed and why, and use that as a means to prepare yourself for when, if a deal's not getting done today or next week, when you're looking to get something done in a quarter or so. Because to echo Bob and Vivian, I think there are funds that are keeping reserves kind of in-house in case there's a capital need for their existing portfolio companies down the line. We've heard that and we've seen that. But at the same time, especially the high net worth sphere of investor and others, there's a very large appetite for exciting biotechs. Biotech is a sector that has performed better than the other subsectors of the S&P, right? And there's a lot of exciting innovation. Biotech's not the industry under the gun that it had been for many years. I think that the macro picture has lifted. And so for the right opportunity, for the right companies, there's still a lot of interest.
Good. Well, I'm going to stick with you, Matt. We're going to reverse the order here for this question, because I want to continue sort of or expand on that idea of being prepared, right? And what you were talking about is be prepared, understand the market, understand what's out there. But given that pitches are online now, they're not necessarily able to meet at that conference or be in your office. Do you have some best practice recommendations for how to prepare a presentation and give a presentation online that might be different from how they would pursue that in person? Matt, again, I'm gonna stick with you on that one because.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of the considerations you would have in an in-person presentation apply to the virtual, kind of sphere and medium. But what I would say is when you're meeting, I guess one main point I would make is when you're meeting with an investor in person, you can read the situation, you can read the person, you can pick up better. Are they understanding what I'm talking about? Do they get, the program? Are they questioning something? Are they, and so you're able to pick up on those cues and address them. And I think that's the beauty of in-person interactions. When we think about the virtual pitch process, especially if there's no video involved, but even if there is video, you can't always pick up those cues. And what I try to explain to either the entrepreneurs that we're funding or companies we're advising or whatever is, what you have to say or what you are pitching, that's not necessarily the most important thing in the interaction with an investor. The most important thing is understanding, is your message resonating? And what's the context? What preconceived biases do they have? What are their existing portfolio holdings? What questions might they have or not? And at what level do you need to speak with your audience and speak with your investor? Are you coming at it from a sophisticated point of view or a more general point of view? And so I think you need to tailor your pitch to the audience, and you need to create engagement throughout the process. So you need to check in to understand, is my pitch resonating? Because if I spend 45 minutes and I'm talking the whole time, and I think it's going great because I'm saying everything I want to say, and that's the most important thing, well, what you might not even know is that the person you're pitching to, tuned out 20 minutes ago because they didn't understand, they didn't think what you're saying is as important as what they think is most important, and you just lost the opportunity. So when we talked about networking and trying to create new interactions, when you get those, because that's, first step is getting them. When you get them, they're very valuable opportunities to create a connection. Make sure you use it as best as possible. And the only way you can do that is if you're creating real engagement, and if you care not just about what you have to say, but you care that what you're saying is resonating.
Good advice. Thank you. Stephanie.
Reverse order is keeping us on our toes.
Yep.
So we really encourage people to reach out. That, and again, if you take nothing else from the panel today, I'm hoping that people really appreciate that we're here to talk with you, and we would really like people to reach out well in advance of the application process. So what do I mean when I say reach out? So there are 27 different institutes and centers at the National Institutes of Health, and that's a lot of institutes and centers. There is an SBIR program coordinator for each one of those centers, and that individual's job is to help coordinate and help basically be that first point of contact for the SBIR and STTR programs. Generally, people can look at the institutes and centers and figure out, hey, I'm in diabetes, and there's a national institute, that specifically has diabetes in the title, so that's probably where I should go. But even if you guess wrong, some people are a little concerned. They say, well, what if I email the wrong person? That happens all the time. And my comment is, we all know each other. It's actually a fairly small community, and we will pass you to the right person to get you to the appropriate contact. So where do you find all those individuals? You can find them on that small business website. On the left-hand side, there's an Engage and Connect. And if you hover over that, there's IC, Institute and Center, contacts. Or again, you can just email our NIH, the main email address, sbir@od.nih.gov, and will give us a brief description, and we'll help connect you. When you contact a program officer, I generally tell everybody, particularly in this day and age when we're not in the office, when everybody's kind of working remotely, send an email and give a brief description of the technology. Give a brief description of what you would like the funding for. Hey, this is the rough proposal that I'm planning. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's more important that you reach out early and get feedback and see what programs are available and see where you might get the best fit than waiting for what you think is the most perfect document to send to the program official. Much better to come with a draft and say, look, this is what I'm thinking. How does this fit? What's the best programs for me to use? That is generally the best way. And then again, we may have one email or one call exchange, and then we may have follow-ups. There may be additional touch points, and that's perfectly acceptable. So I think one of the great things about the NIH is that we encourage you to come talk to us. That's part of what our job is to help companies navigate the system and navigate the programs.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Vivian.
So we've had exposure to companies presenting to us via Zoom, and I actually recently judged a regional conference of 4 presenters, and very much it's around how they use technology. So 2 things. One is when you're doing this and you're sharing your screen and you're showing slides, you've got to be able to make first that personal connection. So they hear their voice, you see them. So do an introduction before you start your slides about yourself so that they get to see you and know you. And be proficient in moving between the slides and yourself to answer questions. Encourage questions throughout. Don't just do your presentation, as I heard Matt say earlier, and stop and wait for questions. And I think that personal engagement up front is going to be critical because it'll allow the people who are listening to the pitch to feel comfortable to interrupt you during your presentation. The other thing is practice with other people with Zoom or whatever you're using with other people so they can watch how you do it and give you feedback. It is a different experience and it's a more difficult one to do. I heard someone say once that even if you're on the phone, you should always smile because the smile comes through your voice. I don't know if that's true, but do try to have that kind of happy, smiley, engaged persona in the video.
Thank you. I think that's good advice. And last but not least, since in
Sure.
first order there, Bob, what advice do you?
Yeah, I agree with pretty much what everybody said. And a couple of thoughts, I guess. One is even in person, it's really important to understand who you are addressing, who they are, what deals they've done, what industry they go in, what do they like, what do they don't like. And if you have to, call an entrepreneur in their portfolio, right? I've not ever had any issues with me looking for money, calling someone who's a fellow entrepreneur and asking him or her, what's Bob like? Is he good, bad? What do I look for? So do that homework because I think that then helps, you understand who's there. I think the asking questions is great. One of the things I thought about, because it's Zoom and everybody, you know, is, oh, I don't want to sit there for another hour. What do I have? So you got to be, I think, really focused up. Sometimes I thought of the one or two slides, you know, after an introduction. Here's what I'm going to tell you about today, folks. Then tell them and then remind them at the end, you know, that old rule. And so is there a way for you in maybe 2 slides to hit 5, 6, whatever, really high points, so that if all you get is 10 minutes or 15 minutes, right? Harder to leave a meeting when you're in person. Easier to leave at Zoom. Oh, my technology cut out. Sorry, you know, it didn't, but it happens. So I sometimes wonder if up front you say, here's the 5 or whatever number of things that you really need to know, and then we'll talk about it later on. So those are just some things, but everybody had some great ideas on top.
Thank you, and thank you all for those answers. I'm going to pause the prepared questions here. We're just in the last few minutes. I think, Jason, we're scheduled to finish it right at 3 o'clock. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So if anyone has any in the audience has any questions, please post those in the chat or the Q&A. And looks like we've been infiltrated by my friend John Lewis at BioOhio.
Yeah, let me jump in here, Russell. John, the answer is no. No one in the Southeast may invest anywhere except in the Southeast. I don't know if the panelists see the question from John, but you know, what is the appetite for investing outside your region? I think, you know, Vivian and Russell, you know, I don't know that that's possible, right? They're coming to your states in your cases, Matt.
But I have a comment. We welcome him to move to North Carolina.
Yes, that's right.
There you go. Yeah.
And he can bring all of
Virginia.
his investors here. That's totally fine. Yeah, but Matt and Bob, obviously NIH is everywhere. So
Yes, across the country.
yeah.
Yeah, Bob,
Yeah,
Bob
for
do you have a comment? I have a comment on that, but Bob?
So for us, it would have to be some affiliation with the university. So alumni, if you're an alum, you know, would certainly look at that no matter where you are.
And I would say, yeah, absolutely. We will look at anything, anywhere. In fact, I love looking in areas where, you know, that are kind of less trafficked, if you will. So, you know, whether it's Seattle, St. Louis, Ohio, so we'll look at any idea. It's really just about the idea that we want to, you know, check. But no, we'll look anywhere.
So I guess with those answers, we'll never be panelists again, huh, Jason and Russell? Because we said we might go outside the Southeast. We're done now.
Only in very special circumstances.
Any other?
I had to switch computers, so I've had a big mess. So I know there was a question earlier about SBIR being great early stage. You know, what are the follow-ups to that? You know, getting into phase 1, phase 2. You know, do you all invest beyond that, or sorry, Stephanie, go ahead.
There are you're absolutely so. I agree. I think the SBIR and STTR is a great way to support early stage research and companies in that earlier stage. We recognize that there is often a gap between the phase 2 and the ability to commercialize, or even a good inflection point where either an investor or a partner may be interested in coming in. We have something called a phase 2B. So that's an additional phase 2 to help provide some additional support for those kinds of technologies. And we have a new program called the Commercialization Readiness Pilot Program. And that program is a little bit different in that, unlike a standard phase 2, which is really, again, and a phase 2B, which is focused on the research and development, the Commercialization Readiness Pilot Program can also support some of the commercialization assistance and the commercial activities associated with trying to move a company forward and move that technology forward to market. So we have recognized that there is sometimes a gap there, and there are a number of programs that can help support companies as they're making that transition.
Okay.
So just one last thought, I guess, and I think hopefully everyone will agree with me, but to all the entrepreneurs out there, don't stop trying to raise money just because people are slowing or it seems slowing. You know, keep going. It's going to take you a while. Just find different ways to connect, find different ways to get people your message, but don't stop.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Bob. That was my last prepared question. So
Oh,
I didn't think we'd get to it. So that's great. Which is whether to hit the pause button or not. And I, unless anyone has any contrary advice, I think that's probably sound.
Let's get this last one in, kind of lightning round, do your best in 10 seconds type thing. Regarding devices, how much patent due diligence must be performed prior to application for funding? I found attorney patent opinions and FTO opinions a limiting factor while self-funding the project.
So I'll just say that is a classic problem. It doesn't matter if you're a university spin out or you're bringing the technology in from somewhere else. You know, your IP costs are expensive. If you don't have money, difficult to get them. The problem is, at least for us, you know, you've got to either have a license to the technology or a filed, at least a provisional, for us to move forward with funding, because the IP basis forms, you know, what will future be the funding of the company. So it is tough. And I think that that's where friends and family money can come in to support that initial licensing or IP applications as you develop your technology. But we do recognize, particularly if we're dealing with companies that are working with universities may not have filed sufficiently outside the US, and that becomes a burden for that company a couple of years later when investors are interested in it. So it's a really complex question, and it's a good one.
yeah, good answer. I think I agree.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you to everybody, all the panelists. Thank you to those that attended. We had very strong, it's pretty rare that we only have 1 or 2 people drop off during a webinar. So y'all have done a great job. It says thank you, everybody. And with that, have a good weekend.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye-bye.